All right. Thanks for everyone that's joining us live. Just bear with us just a second while we figure out streaming this to our highly populated YouTube channel, I'll add. All right. We are up and running. Okay.
Yeah, it is.
Welcome, everybody, to the November 22 live Q&A session. We got the wonderful Cyrus Shepard with us, who needs very little introduction, but he's going to give you one anyway. And we've been wanting to get Cyrus on for one of our Q&As for a long time. We were briefly in the green room here describing, explaining whether we could actually just have Ian be the doppelganger and pretend to be Cyrus in lieu of Cyrus actively joining. But
I would pay for that.
Yeah, exactly right.
You would overpay, regardless of the price. It would be too much.
Well, before I ramble on too much and people get sick of my accent within 3 minutes of the Q&A, Cyrus, why don't you give everyone listening a bit of an overview of your kind of background, history in the marketing space and what you're up to nowadays?
Yeah, most people know me from my time at Moz. I had a long history there from 2011, back when it was still fairly tiny to its peak in the 2013 to 15, all the way till its acquisition to becoming a public company, which is now J2 Martech. And I left officially for the last time earlier this year. I launched and closed down a software company this year, which maybe we can talk about, some interesting lessons from that. And I get into trouble on Twitter, not as much as Elon Musk, but I definitely get into trouble on Twitter. The Google team doesn't talk to me very much anymore these days, but that's me in a nutshell. I love SEO. I love running experiments and writing about things, and happy to be on the show. And let me preface things a little bit. Over my career, I've done maybe hundreds of interviews and webinars and things like that. I think I've only been intimidated by 2 of them. And one was with John Mueller of Google. And the other one was today, because I'm with 3 guys who know what they're talking about. And so to come
allegedly
Yeah.
know what they're talking about, that is to be disputed. This is why we bring people like yourself in, Cyrus, and just by association and osmosis we get to claim that we know what we're talking
about. Give away
about.
our brand marketing strategy, Matt. God.
See, this is why I should actually know what I'm talking about, and then I wouldn't do this kind of thing, Nick. But
it's just Matt's accent. That's the other half of the plan.
Yes.
Is like osmosis and British accent, and if we join those 2 things together,
more authority than any podcast.
It can quickly turn from legitimacy to villain, though. So, we're on the cusp of that at all times. Anyway, Cyrus, you mentioned a few things in your intro. Before we dive into kind of some of the burning SEO questions that everyone in the community has really greatly submitted to us, I'll also call out for everyone that is watching this live. You can push through questions. If you're in the Zoom, you can use the live Q&A feature. If you are on Twitter, you can @ us, of course. And on YouTube, you can leave something in the comments to go along with the plethora of spam that I'm sure will be there.
Do we allow YouTube comments? That seems like a terrible idea.
Should anybody? I don't know.
Yeah, should probably not do
you're on
that.
the assumption that we're professionals here, Ian, and that is a very bad assumption to make.
Good point.
So, Cyrus, tell us a little bit more, because I know you mentioned most people will know you from your time at Moz. I think you were arguably the best education producer, in my opinion, at Moz, and put over the years ton of great content out there. And then more recently, you talked about kind of like your software space. Can you talk to us just about like a bit of your time in the early days of Moz and what it was like kind of building out education in what was still a pretty emerging SEO space at that point?
Yeah, I don't want to be the old man of SEO, which is I'm becoming one of them, but I think you guys were all working in the space back then, and you remember how sort of magical it was. It was like we were inventing the internet every day, and we didn't know as much about Google back then either. And so it was much easier to discover new things, new ranking techniques, new ranking factors, and debating what those were. And I came into Moz, it was 25 people, and we still all had lunch around, the same table. It was a magical time on the internet, and I had no idea what I was doing. I was an SEO, but I worked on the customer service team, and then suddenly they needed to hire an SEO to do SEO for Moz, and they're like, you. And there I was. How do I do this job? But I just started doing it. I had terrible imposter syndrome, but I had a background of writing and speaking, and I think that served well in that role, because communication, if you can write and speak well, you can succeed at many jobs that you have no right at succeeding at. Also being a white male certainly helped a lot, which in retrospect, at the time in that position, was probably a bigger factor than it should have been. But yeah, I really enjoyed writing and breaking things, and Moz was a perfect environment for that, especially in the Rand Fishkin days, because he liked breaking things too.
For sure. So what kind of led you? So you launched Zippy in, was that 2-3 years ago now?
Well, so we launched the brand, but we didn't really launch the software until soft launch about a year ago, official launch in 2021. And having been working in SEO software for a long time, I really wanted my own SEO software company, and I launched it, and it was okay, and then I had to close it down. I need to preface this in saying that I'm under NDA and a non-disparaging agreement, but the short story is my partner and I just couldn't make the business relationship work. But I think they say, 80% of startups fail, and the first one is a good predictor of success for your second one. So I'm looking forward to my second SEO software startup.
What was kind of some of the big? I'm sure you've got the pick good co-founders kind of takeaway. One of my regrets from our time launching Traffic Think Tank, actually, but that's a different story. But what were kind of some of the takeaways that you had from launching software in the SEO space outside of that?
Well, so I think most of the criticisms of SEO software companies are mostly data companies. We know this, and I know in my time at Moz, there's a huge market out there that doesn't want data. They're small business owners, people who are in a hurry. People who build SEO tools assume that people who use them are experts and they have all the time in the world to sit down and figure out interfaces and things like that. And people just want solutions very quickly. Most people aren't even interested in using an SEO tool. They just want their traffic to go up. And that was sort of my dream in building Zippy, to build something a little smarter than just a data dump. And that is incredibly hard. It is incredibly hard to make things easy for people. And I'm not sure we quite nailed it. The tools at Moz over the years have gotten criticism for being for beginners, and some of that is rightly so. And I think when you dig into the data, that's not necessarily true, but the user interfaces and the way the data is presented and the downloads and the actionable reports just weren't there in the later years. And so Moz kind of got shoehorned into this beginner's tool. And I'm rambling now. I don't know where I'm going, but I learned a lot of lessons, Matthew. And the biggest lesson I think I learned was from a business perspective that I need to be the boss. And it didn't work. It didn't work well in a partnership, and we were just there's a lot of arguments, and I'm not a confrontational person. But next startup, I'll be the boss.
Do you know what the next startup is going to be? Do you have the idea for what you want to build already?
Zippy 2.0. I have no non-compete, so I'm free to rebuild the same software again if I wanted to. but something like that, and probably something simpler. I think I tried to make something way too complicated, and unfortunately, I'm probably going to slip back into more of a data layer when presenting information, because it seems like that works really well. One of the best new startups, Keyword Insights, that everybody is using. I think they've hit the right mix of data and actionability, and they're doing great things there. And they have a small team; they can work fast and produce a lot of new things quickly. That's kind of the model of what's succeeding right now in the SEO software space. And I expect them to be copied by big tools.
Oh, they already are. At least they have a good sense of humor about it, and because Andy Chadwick calls out that stuff on the daily, and so yeah, I think they take it as constructive criticism and product market fit and validation more than anything. So yeah, those guys are doing really cool stuff.
It's a sign of success when you get copied.
Yeah, and I think in like many cases, like in the software space, I think this is a lot for when you look at the SEO software space in particular, and this blends with like most marketing spaces, sales spaces, CRM, stuff like that, is there's a select group of larger players in the space, right? Like the SEMrush, Ahrefs, Moz still, and a few others maybe in amongst all of that. And their play for a long time has been like expansion into being an all-in-one kind of platform, so they can have revenue expansion. But coming in as a new player in the space, it's not like you can just be like, all right, cool, we're going to go in as the all-in-one SEO software and do kind of everything, right? You come in as a point solution, then you kind of land, expand on that. The challenge of like getting product market fit with a point solution, either not just being bought or copied or outcompeted into obsolescence, like it is really, really challenging. And that's what so many of these like great tools do. Like you either get bought by Neil Patel or a big player like basically recreates what you're doing, and it's tough to compete. So it's great to hear though that you're trying to like jump into the SEO software space, and obviously the challenging situation you've kind of had over the past couple of years hasn't deterred you from going from that. So that's great to hear.
In the meantime, I've started consulting again with a bunch of different clients to keep my feet in the game and to keep my skills warmed up, and that's been interesting too. Although I have to admit, I kind of have a love-hate relationship with client work. Again, I want to be the boss, and I love working on my own sites a little bit more than client sites, but I learn so much more when I work with a diversity of sites and unique problems and see what real people are being faced with. So that's been interesting too.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that, right? So you've kind of had this period of time where you've been working largely on your own kind of projects. You've been focused a bit more heads down in the software space, probably doing a lot less on the consulting side, right? Yeah. And then you've jumped back here. From the consulting work you're doing on the SEO side of things today, what do you think has been like the biggest things that you're noticing has changed in the way that either like companies are approaching SEO or like the problems they're trying to solve versus say even like going back 5 years, but maybe even a little bit further than that when you were probably consulting a little bit more? What are some of the things that stand out for you?
I would say there's a bit less technical SEO today. Technical SEO problems usually crop up on larger sites and often indexing issues. In the old days, every site was a technical SEO wonderland. You'd go in and like, oh, we have to fix all these various things. Today, there's a list of, best practices. There's certain areas that you hit technically, with speed and making sure everything works properly. But today, it's more about competitive gaps in the SERPs, SERP appearances, things like that, and the technical is just sort of assumed for the most part. But those are some of the more interesting challenges that you face. Also, I think the expectations have shifted a little bit in the last 5 to 10 years, where SEO used to be considered a little bit more magic, and now it's a little more commoditized and productized. You sort of know what you're getting when you order SEO services these days, and people have more realistic expectations and more set expectations, but they also see the need.
Some people.
What's that, Nick?
Some people have more levels of expectations.
Yeah. So I think those things have shifted. It's become, the business is much more mature than it used to be, and I think it's a little easier. I think everything's a little bit easier these days, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
But maybe not if you're just breaking in.
I imagine that being the case. What do you see as well, Ian, on your side? Because I know obviously you do a bit more consulting on the SEO side than I do. Like, do you find on your side that like the technical side of things has started to wane down a bit, or in certain niches and stuff that you see that less?
A bit, yeah. So I think a lot of it from the folks that I work with, a lot of it has come with just like more platform dominance, right? So like every Shopify site tends to have the same like 2 or 3 things that aren't ideal, but like not game changers either, right? Like, okay, yeah, like it's okay if this issue persists, but like it's better if we adjust your category template so that it does this and not that, right? But like as more people kind of migrate into like WordPress, Webflow, Shopify, and like those 3 CMSs show up over and over and over again, like I don't know if there's actually less problems or if it just feels like there's less problems because the folks that I end up working with are with platforms that I'm familiar with over and over again. So it seems like there's not as many issues. I do though, I think that's a big part of it because I think back to like when I first got to Lending Tree and we had a home built CMS that was just like Frankenstein together over the course of years and years and years. And it was like, everything is a pain in the ass. Like asking for a change to a robots file was a Jira ticket that had 8 hours of work logged to it. And it was like, what is happening? Like I asked for 2 lines of text to be changed. How is this real life? So like, I don't see that stuff happening as much anymore, which is fantastic.
Yeah, we had the exact same problems at Moz, which was an embarrassment, not to be able to get like canonical tags or not to be mobile friendly or, you know, things like that. I think the other thing that needs to be recognized is some of it's Google itself, in that nowadays everything is a hint and not an absolute directive. And so you get to weigh the cost benefit analysis. In the old days, you'd say, well, we need to add, you know, the canonical tag. It's probably not going to make a difference, but it's a rule. And now today you're like, well, they'll probably figure it out. And we don't need to spend hours of engineering on it. So I think Google just getting better at ignoring some of the work that SEO does has also played a role.
Yeah, and it kind of has cleared out some of those nice little loopholes that many were able to like exploit with stuff like that at the time. It's kind of leveled things out a little bit as well. So yeah, it's definitely changed a lot. I want to dig into some of the questions that we've had come through from the community, because got a whole host of different things that I think we can start to discuss. I think one of the things that that you've talked a lot about over the years, Cyrus, is around like obviously like the content creation process and all of that areas. One of the kind of questions is just like understanding a bit more about like your process for kind of creating content briefs, and just like how to really think through putting those kind of like bits of information together, whether that be something that would be like for in-house or with agencies, with contractors, some of the stuff, anything that you can share around that. I'm sure Nick and Ian also have like input on this because they do this a lot, but anything on your side that you'd share with people listening?
Yeah, I can share my process for creating content briefs, and it's quite simple and probably non-surprising. Currently, you know, I go through my keyword research process, which I won't dive into. I'm using keyword insights to create content clusters. I'm using Market Muse to help create the content briefs. I think there's a lot of good software, and some of their competitors are also really good, but currently using Market Muse, and then I, you know, kind of shape it into a custom thing that I deliver to the client, along with, you know, the interlinking strategies that go along with that. I'm big on internal links. I think the problem is I want to segue that into a larger conversation about creating content, and because AI has changed so much, and it's changing faster than we can keep up with it. And it's very easy right now for anybody to use a process like I just described and go on and create a perfectly reasonable content brief that will rank in the SERPs. And I think with AI, we have the tendency that we've had this problem we've had for years, that everybody ends up producing the same type of content. And something that I've done since the very beginning of my career, and I think it's because I'm married to a graphic designer, is that when everybody is producing the same content, you have to find a way to make your content stand out and be better. And AI gives the tools for everybody to create content easily. So the problem is, how do you take that content and elevate it to be deserving of ranking in the top 3 spots of Google search, or the top 1 spot? And you're not going to do that by just creating a content brief and pumping it out and giving it to the client. You still have to have that creative oomph. Am I giving people a tool? Am I giving them crazy unique graphics? Am I giving them information in a way that's never been used before, whether it be a video or instructions? That's the secret sauce. And I don't think that has changed one iota since 2010, 2011, when I got started. And I'm very passionate about that aspect of it.
Well, let's talk about links in amongst all of that. Everyone's favorite topic of about how long did it take me? 23 minutes. So yeah, I feel like every couple of years since I've ever been in the SEO industry, it was like, well, look, links are getting less important, or links are dying. Like they're not the thing that's like a big ranking signal. Where kind of is your take on this when it comes to, okay, like you got to have kind of great content, of course. It's got to stand out from the rest, kind of course. Like, are the days of just brute forcing your way to the top of the SERPs with links gone, or are they still kind of the most important factor?
I think they're the 3 factors, the 3 pillars of my SEO philosophy. Everybody has different: content, links, and satisfaction or user engagement metrics, things like that. The idea that you need the content to even get on the page, you need links to push you to the first page of Google results, and you need to minimally satisfy, or hopefully excellently satisfy, user satisfaction to reach, the top 2 spots. Typically, you don't see terrible content in those top spots, regardless of how many links they have. So all 3 of those factors, but links are incredibly important. Same as you, I've heard about their demise for years. Google has been encouraging that narrative in a self-serving way because they got into, they have trouble distinguishing good links, bad links, even to this day. They know people can brute force their way. So I think a lot of that is simply narrative, and we know links are important. And yeah, I'm rambling again. I'm not very good at this. Sorry.
This is great. This is why you're here. You can ramble with us. We're all ramblers.
Rambling.
So it kind of leads me on to, so we saw a tweet that you posted out yesterday where you were talking about kind of PR and buying domains, both really effective link building strategies. We've talked a lot about domains and also just straight up website acquisitions. Did a lot of this in my time at HubSpot. And yeah, we'd just love to pick your brains on kind of how you approach stuff like that. And especially on like the domain side, because we have a lot of talk about this inside Traffic Think Tank. So it'd be great to hear your take.
Yeah, so I feel like I'm a little out of depth here because this is one of those situations where I feel like everybody else in this room is a better link builder than I am. I've never really been a fan of link outreach. I've done it. I've bought links in the past. I've done every type. But I like to lead with content. But sometimes it's unavoidable to get those links. I'm working with a startup right now. One of the first things I like to do is just when I'm working with a brand new website, especially if it's in the technology space, which I have experiences, is do the basic directory links. The angel investing sites, the tech crunches, just to get the basics out there. Those links don't have a lot of value, but they help Google disambiguate your business from others. I'm actually a huge fan of things that you can control yourself, and that's why I've spent so much time studying internal links. Zippy, the last tool that we built at Zippy, was an internal linking tool. We spent a lot of time on it. It was great. The user interface was not ever where we wanted to be. It was not as useful. But I think internal links have been sort of gotten a bad rap over the years with the narrative that they're not as powerful as external links, and they're not, but they're extremely powerful. And I don't think people use internal links as much. So I like to focus my efforts on things that you can control easily, and that's improving your internal anchor text and improving your internal link coverage. I saw a tweet from Mike King a few weeks ago. When they're working with an enterprise client and they want something to rank, they know if they throw 200 internal links at it, they can get them to the top of the SERPs no matter what. It's not easy to build those 200 links internally and vary them, but you can control that. You can have a process for that, and you can get to the top without ever asking for an external link. So that's where I think is interesting, and where I like to focus my efforts.
Yeah, a good friend of Traffic Think Tank, Kevin Indig, I'm sure.
Oh yeah,
would agree with you. Yeah, I mean, yeah, definitely, like during my time at HubSpot, we could practically rank for anything that was related to marketing, sales, service. Like it's not even an exaggeration. Within 30 days, if we just hammered a ton of our internal links to that page, is like surprisingly powerful.
Let me say something. My current pet theory, which may be controversial. We did a big internal link study earlier this year, and we found the number one correlated metric to ranking was the number of not the number of internal links that you had, but the number of anchor text variations. And it just kept going up and up and up. An example would be like you have exact match anchor text, some partial match, some generic anchor text. And I'm sure we're all familiar with the theory that if you have a newer site, you can get away with a lot less of exact match and optimized anchor text than you can if you're a bigger established site. Well, my current working theory is that maybe that's not as true as we think it is. It's just that the larger sites, more established sites, have so much. It's not that they have more authority. They have so much anchor text variety for nearly every page. We looked at Home Depot, and even their furthest least crawled pages had so much anchor text variation that it didn't matter what you threw at it, exact match or whatever, it would rank. So I think that expanding your anchor text variation footprint for your newer sites is going to have a really profound effect, and it will help you get away with a lot more down the line. That's and I want to get some data to validate that, but maybe in a few months, next year.
It's stuff like that always falls into the bucket for me of like, interesting, this might be true, or a lot of internal link anchor text variation is just a sign that you have an SEO team working on this site. And so like, yes, then it ranks better because there's a bunch of people paying attention to it and working on it, which is weird with like every correlation study. Cause it's like, well, if we're all friggin' doing this, then like, yeah, it's going to correlate pretty well. Like if everybody who spends their time learning how to rank sites sees the same best practice checklist, all of these are going to show up in every correlation study because like we're all doing it.
And I realized I just became that guy because in previous years, if I ever saw a study on anchor text ratios, I'm like, that person went too far down the rabbit hole and they're not focusing. And now I'm like, oh yeah, let me tell you, anchor text ratio.
We've all been there, Cyrus. We've all been there. Don't worry.
No, I mean, so like, not to like naysay what I just said, because I think the core point of that is still true. But like, as somebody who ran a bunch of GSA links to domains, like, yeah, anchor text is super, super important. And like anchor text through tiers, like, yes, it is hugely important. And you can like very quickly torch a site without it. But to your point, like there's very different rules for like the garbage I was throwing GSA links at versus like a homedepot.com, right? Like just completely different worlds.
Yeah. And if anybody at any of the major tool companies are watching this show, my gripe with tool companies and link metrics in general is, every link has two components, which is, relevance and popularity, page rank and anchor text. And every tool focuses on the popularity, the page rank, the metric score, and we're very bad at presenting anchor text metrics around that. I wish tools did a better job of that.
I think like the big challenge is often, is that exact piece's relevancy. I think this is actually the crux of why it's so difficult to build simple SEO software for that isn't just targeted at beginners is because relevancy is subjective and is very complex, right? And it's like, okay, like if I want to rank for and there's levels to relevancy as well, right? Not just on just a purely semantic level. You've got like different pieces of content that you want to rank for very specific things, but then you've got kind of much more broadly across whole sections of the site, like you want to just absorb as much of like the long tail as possible, especially in things like e-com or larger informational sites. But tools being able to, on their own, determine relevancy just nearly always fail because they just take a starting point that's often wrong. And then the only other way is like, okay, well, do I like allow the user to determine the starting point of relevancy? And what anyone that's ever been behind the scenes of a software company realizes, like, never let your users loose on the insights. So it's really, really tough. And I think that's always kind of the crux of a lot of this that happens when you come into like analyzing stuff. The best time, like I probably learned like 95% of pretty much everything I learned in SEO was way back in the days when most of my time was spent like building private blog networks, where everything was just about like, how can I do things like increase anchor text diversity to be able to give me more of a leeway in being able to do kind of more aggressive stuff in one area, and then how do I like really like narrow in on relevancy, right? And a lot of that back then was just, what is my anchor text, right? And then it's like breaking this all out, and then it's like content focus and stuff like that, and you kind of test the boundaries of what's acceptable and what's not, and you can kind of take that on. I feel like most of us have probably been in that sphere at one point in the past. So it's I don't really necessarily have a point to this.
It's okay.
Most of my
I was wondering where you were going.
Theme. The rambling.
I want to pick on something you said, which is you learn 95% of your SEO, back in the day when you were building, private blog networks and everything. So I'm going to tell you one of my favorite old man SEO stories.
All right.
When I started at Moz, I had about a year and a half of SEO experience under my belt. I was working for local small businesses, and then all of a sudden I'm SEO for Moz, and I have this huge imposter syndrome. About 2 weeks into this situation where I have imposter syndrome, I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. Back in those days, Moz would take meetings with very large companies and startups. So we took a meeting with Facebook, and I'm sitting in
small company. Haven't heard of it.
Yeah. So back then Facebook was cool, everybody, it was the hot new thing. And we're sitting in a meeting with the Facebook growth team, and they're putting up pages of, on their site. They put up a page, I think it was Britney Spears. And they're like, Twitter is outranking us for Britney Spears. Why is that happening? And, I'm sitting there going, do I say anything? And they're blocking Google from crawling the page. There's no content and everything. I'm like, and in that moment, I'm like, well, this is not rocket science. There's no content. There's some obvious reasons. The rules that worked in my limited experience of SEO also applied to Facebook and Britney Spears. So I spoke up. I'm like, well, gentlemen, I think what we're dealing with here, blah, blah, blah. And I sounded very intelligent. I'm like, part of my imposter syndrome went away. But those early skills, Matthew, there is so little new in SEO that if you get those basics down, they apply to any situation in any site. And it's kind of a magical thing.
100%. There are just so many things that have just remained pretty much consistently true in SEO since pretty much the beginning all the way through to now. Like the way that like they like manifest in you approach, especially stuff like content, things like that change a little bit.
And some things we don't talk about anymore because Google kind of controls the narrative, like page rank sculpting, which is totally a thing, but has fallen out of favor. And if you talk about it, you're like, oh, you're talking about fairies now. But That's another shift. That's another shift in the landscape over the last 10 years is how successful Google has become in controlling the narrative. And they've invested hugely in the, in their webmaster team, their Google Search Central, their documentation. Google is now the #1 source on Google for SEO information, and they've displaced companies like Moz and Ahrefs and everything like that. They've done a great job, but some of those down and dirty techniques don't get talked about anymore.
Yeah, agreed.
Cyrus, why on earth don't they talk to you anymore? I don't understand.
Oh, I have regrets.
Mistakes were made, huh?
Yeah, I got into a tussle with some members of the webmaster team, people I respect, Gary Ilias, John Mueller, and then they had to quit talking to me because we got into antitrust issues, and so this argument was left hanging on Twitter, and then I wrote this big blog post about how Google can't talk about antitrust issues because I wanted to win the argument. I couldn't
Bring back Matt Cutts. That's what I say. Bring back the good old days.
Yeah, I couldn't let it go, and I should have let it go because it was just a way of me winning the argument, and I knew they couldn't argue back. And since then, the webmaster team has quit talking to me. I'm person non grata, and Gary Ilias left Twitter because of that incident, or at the same time of that incident. He's now on Mastodon, which is really great. I probably won't bug him there. I'm just going to leave him be. But yeah, I think I may consider not publishing that blog post if things were to be laid out again.
So
did you win the argument? But did you win the argument? Sorry.
Well, I had the last word, but that's not winning.
We'll chalk that as a win. I'll class that as Cyrus won, at Google nil.
No. So I have a few regrets.
What I'm hearing is we should Photoshop Cyrus's face onto the XKCD. I can't. Somebody is wrong on the internet. Cartoon page.
Right.
Well, the designer's working on it right now.
And it was during the pandemic. There were riots in the street. People were restless, and I was angry. I was angry, damn it. So
righteous nerd rage. I like it.
Yeah. Oh well.
All right, let's jump into another question because we have done what we always do and just basically waffle on for a while. So we talked a little bit about, and you mentioned AI earlier, Cyrus. I feel like we've been kind of skirting around this topic, but what ways, if any, are you using AI, ML in kind of the day-to-day SEO kind of like systems, strategies that you're implementing? I think the most common way that I've heard of it over the years really has been around like keyword classification. Are you using it for that? More than that? Are you doing much of like fully AI generated content? Like talk to us a little bit more about AI and ML.
Yeah, so I mentioned two, which is keyword clustering and content briefs, using products that anybody can use. Like everybody else, I'm playing around with content editors like Lex. I think Jasper is another one. I don't like them myself, but I think I'm encouraging clients to use them, especially when, producing day-to-day content as sort of prompts. It's moving so fast, and it is hard to keep up with, even the people who are, on the cusp of it. And I don't know what's going to happen, but I think we're seeing a lot of programmatic SEO produced sites, whole cloth, that are, just AI generated, and they're going to get better and better. And I'm not confident Google's going to be able to keep up with that, or Google cares. If it's good content and it deserves to rank. I think Google's trying to answer that question themselves. But then we get back to what I said earlier, when everybody's producing AI content, which is going to happen, I think it's a certainty. You have to figure out, how do I stand out in that crowd? How do I produce something that can't be generated by AI, and put the human touch in there? I think there's always going to be room for creators in the new economy. So yeah, I don't know.
Seems to be GPT-3's just had like a pretty substantial update recently, and it's like scary good.
Yeah.
Like insanely good. And it feels like we're kind of moving to a point now where, for the longest time, really, most people probably, most consumers probably not been aware actually how much of financial content has been just AI generated for such a long time anyway. But it kind of felt somewhat constrained to that. I saw like a load of examples of just like AI generated recipe content, and it was like unbelievable. It was like how the quality of like the content that supported it. As much as I love reading every recipe blog and what that person did for that whole day to then scroll down past the ads and get to the bit I want, it was actually able to really pull together like recipes and stuff. So yeah, it's starting to get to a point where I think for the first time I'm getting on the fence of like, okay, this is going to extend way beyond just the kind of, I guess, like the matter of fact content and getting into more creative content now. I don't know if Nick, Ian, you guys are seeing similar stuff or are doing stuff with like AI and ML content at the moment.
Does anybody else have FOMO, fear of missing out? Because I feel like it's happening so fast, and the people who are adopting these technologies are like doing things that I cannot do right now. I'm like, I'm going to become irrelevant.
No, so I will say I am certainly a Luddite in that if you set me in front of an OpenAI API key, I would just like barf in my lap. Like I would do absolutely nothing worthwhile with it. So like I am a connoisseur of publicly available tools that all you need is a credit card number to get access to. And then like that's my sweet spot. But in using stuff like Jasper, like I think my experience is pretty similar to stuff that I've seen other people echo, where it's like, yep, if I want a paid Facebook ad copy and I need 30 different things to just go and test against each other, like perfect, works great. If I want 1,500 words on topic XYZ, like a lot harder. And then you basically end up like, okay, I'm going to go do my brief like normal to get all my subheadings, because then my subheadings are what's going to be the prompt for Jasper. And like, I'm not actually asking it to write me a 1,500 word article. I'm asking it to write me 200 words 7 or 8 times. And then it does better. But for me, by the time I get through that, I'm like, well, Jesus Christ, I could have just hired an actual writer and had somebody really do that. like when it's at that point of like, it takes a lot of fine tuning and tweaking and like being in every single section with it. I'm just like, I could just pay a writer to do this for real.
Yeah.
You mean you're not setting up your spin tags in your article spinner? And
no, I mean like for stuff that I don't care if it's garbage, like, okay, great, that's beautiful. Like this is great, let's go. But like for trying to get good content out of it, it still feels like it's a lot of work, which is probably good, because if it wasn't a lot of work, like if you could just give it like, hey, here's my keyword, and it gives you 1,500 words and it's like good, then like, okay, that's a whole new can of worms that we'll all have to figure out how the hell do you deal with that. But
which is almost certainly going to happen, right? Like, it and the rate of innovation in AI, especially on like content generation, whether that be through images, stuff like that. I think I seen Cyrus, you posted, I can't remember what channel this is on, but like you did like what was the superhero-y type image thing, like the profile pictures where you can like,
profile picture AI.
AI.
One of several profile picture startups. Yeah. Very worth the $19 I spent to have some fun, but very, very interesting. The question though, like to Ian's point, if Google is doing these things too, and they're using AI to generate some featured snippet answers, their knowledge panel things, Mount Everest is such and such high, limited to 1 or 2 paragraphs, but they're using all these tools as well. And you have to ask yourself, if I can generate a couple quick paragraphs using just AI, what's to stop Google from doing the same thing if they have high confidence in it? And I imagine their standards are very high for accuracy, even though we see mistakes all the time. What's your differentiator at that point? And you're not going to have one. Google's just going to do the same thing and knock you down in the search. So you need your differentiators still to endpoint. It has to be hard. If it's not hard, you're not going to set yourself apart.
Yeah, it's tough because I feel like it seems like the one obvious negative for most of us consequence is like, oh, how is Google going to deal with like continued proliferation of massively generated AI content? You just take the DA knob and turn it up higher and higher, and you only rank sites that are like very, very high trust. and then like the rest of us are screwed unless you're working on, you know, a DA 80 or DR 80, whatever metric you want to toss on it. Not that I think Google actually uses domain like they're
Wait, Google that's
Wait,
not
no.
That's the number one ranking factor,
their
Ian.
actual version. The thing that DA is trying to model is the same thing that Google is trying to model. That stuff.
Yep.
So I think it's frustrating where it's like, yeah, it just gets harder and harder to compete because like the same thing with misinformation, like the way to try and combat that is you only rank really highly trusted websites on certain topics. So like trying to break into an industry like that where the bar is just getting higher and higher and higher is going to be exceedingly difficult. And so I think doing an SEO first project in a lot of industries is going to get really, really hard. Like you almost have to be personality first. Like you've got to be, oh God, what's her name? I'm going to completely blank now like a jerk. Erica something or another has the Erica told me TikTok and Instagram finance advice. And like now she has one of the top business podcasts on iTunes and is interviewing Pete Buttigieg. And like that's not off the back of generated a bunch of articles and ranked well in Google. It's like very personality driven social content. And now like people search for her. So I feel like it's kind of, I think Rand actually did a blog post forever ago about like Airbnb versus VRBO. And it was like, yeah, more people search Airbnb than search vacation rentals now. So like, it's that very like brand or personality first approach that then just makes everything else easier is probably what you're going to have to do if you want to enter a space like credit cards or health advice or but like anything that has a really high bar. The days of I'm going to make a shitload of content about this and like it'll be good content and whatever, but like ranking is going to be the way that I get my initial attention is just almost impossible in some spaces. In others, it's fine. Like if you just want to rank a bunch of pages and throw a Zoic ads on there and whatever, like you're still okay. But if you're trying to play in like very highly competed spaces, it's basically impossible now.
Yeah. You totally, I want to talk more about that, but I did want to argue with you at something. Now that I no longer work for Moz, I can reveal, because my NDA has expired, that our biggest customer was Google. They just bought domain authority metrics and they actually didn't have an algorithm. They just ranked everything by DA. I think they're still doing that to this day. DA.
I knew it.
Google.
I knew it.
We had Matt Cutts credit card, he just paid every.
We actually, when I was at
API
HubSpot, we just paid for the number one spot for most keywords anyway, directly to Google. They took ACH. It was incredibly easy for us. So it's great. It's really good. Just clarifying that was not the case because I still am under NDA.
The attorneys are already drafting their letter, Matthew. It's too late.
Yeah, they've already cut that part out of the YouTube live stream. That's going to be me on the hook. Anyway, let's swiftly move on to probably like the last question we got time for that takes us still on the kind of topic of content to a certain extent, but slightly different angle, right? So I think, Cyrus, you're definitely one of the, if not the best educator in the space. I think you've kind of shown that over the years, whether that be in some of the older like Whiteboard Friday videos or like the newer content that you produce. And I think what you do a really great job of is explaining complex topics simply. And and I think that as a skill is incredibly underrated and transitions very well into a whole host of industries outside of things like SEO. But for people that are like aspiring creators and in particular educators in industries that are either complex, technical, or just have high knowledge barriers to entry, what are some of the things that you've found to work well, whether that be like specific tactics or approaches or frameworks or ways that you typically approach educational content? What have you found to work well over the years for kind of breaking down some of those like complex topics in a way that an audience can understand in not just layman terms, but just like comprehend, even if they are more advanced kind of users?
So I think one thing to recognize is that people are learn in different ways. So different mediums. So many people focus on the written word. I like doing a lot of visuals and videos. I think everybody should sketch out their ideas on a piece of paper, and there's lots of programs you can use online to just draw very simple stick figures with arrows. I work in marketing, and one thing I learned early on is that marketers love arrows. So that's my secret. If you look at everything, if you look at everything I've produced over my career, almost everything has an arrow in it. Sometimes this is my cheat code to Twitter. I will take a blog post that's otherwise boring but has very good points. I'll take their graphics and I'll just add an arrow, and that it will go viral.
Next step, profit.
Yes.
I think that is basically where we're at there. It's great.
Yep. Just put arrows on everything and you will win SEO. That's my advice today. So yeah, break everything down and make it simple, and but also think about, we used to talk about shareable assets back in the day, creating those unique images and the unique videos, and with the idea that people are going to steal them and use them as their own. That's always been a concept. Every piece of content that I produce, I want to put something in there that people want to steal. And I used to go through the effort of contacting, doing Google reverse image search and contacting, hey, can we get a link, blah, blah. Nah, not worth the effort anymore. But hopefully people are stealing your content, and that's how you're getting links and mentions and things like that. But yeah, this is the rambling interview show.
This is good. What I've taken away from this is arrows.
Arrows, yes.
The key.
I used to, Dr. Pete Myers, my colleague for many years, we used to go back and forth. I'd say, Pete, put arrows in everything, and he would resist, because Pete is a very, thoughtful, smart man that's better at almost everything than I am. And I would just take his content and put an arrow on it, and that's it.
And look where it got him.
Drove him crazy.
Arrows, Pete. He's not in traffic tank on the webinar right now, is he?
No.
If he'd have put arrows. We love you, Pete. But I'm going to wrap things up now, because we're just going to ramble for the next 5 minutes otherwise.
Right.
And
Yes.
I'm fully prepared for that. But want to say a big thank you, Cyrus, for coming on and rambling with us. I think you shared, amongst the arrow tip, some really good insights. And it was actually just great to kind of hear story, reminisce a little bit, and chat all things SEO.
Well, let me thank you guys for creating Traffic Think Tank. It's such a valuable resource. When I need to know something like, what's the best WordPress tool for this particular thing, or who's a vendor, just going on there and searching through the history of conversations. It's a library of knowledge that's not out there. And I don't think people, the value for that alone, that institutional knowledge is awesome. And I thank you guys for creating that for the world.
We'll get the affiliate check in the post, Cyrus.
Yep.
You've done it proud there. It's great.
We'll
It sounded authentic.
I'm gonna put this on Twitter with an arrow, and you'll know.
Oh, we're gonna watch the money roll in then with those arrows. All right. Well, thank you everyone that's joined.